Hi, everybody. I'm David Nugent, Artistic Director for Hamptons Film, and I want to welcome you to today's post-screening discussion with writer Kemp Powers. Hi, Kemp.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks for having me out today.
Yeah, thanks very much for doing this. So I want to start a little bit before we get into the film in particular. So you were a journalist for 20 years and then made the leap
Almost.
to being a playwright. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that transition?
Yes, indeed. In fact, the night that basically the night that this film is based on is a real night. It really did happen. And when I first discovered it, it was when I was reading a book by a very prominent sports journalist, Mike Marcuse, called Redemption Song, Muhammad Ali and the Spirit of the 60s. And it was about the intersection between sports and the civil rights movement. And when it was one paragraph about this night and how they spent the night together. And my initial plan was to actually write a book about the friendship between these four men. I was still a journalist at the time that I discovered this over 10 years ago. And as fate would have it, my journalism career began to wind down, just as my nascent playwriting, screenwriting career was starting to pick up. And at the time I was writing lots and lots of short plays, 24-hour plays. And someone asked me if I had any ideas for a full-length play. And by this time I had boxes of research material on the friendship between these four men, how they met. And the one thing that kind of stopped me from going further in my book research was I didn't have enough details about what they discussed that night in the room. So the wonderful thing about going into the world of fiction, going into the world of theater, is that the one thing that I didn't have as a journalist that stopped me from finishing the book was actually just what I needed as a starting point for writing the play, which was using all that I knew about these very real men, the very real things they were dealing with, their very real challenges, and using it to inform the characterization of these characters that I would create for this play. So journalism actually has really been kind of like the enabler of my playwriting, my screenwriting, my TV writing career. It's all powered by journalism because reporting just turned into research. And I put a great deal of research into all the creative writing that I do.
Wow. So for that sort of research, is reading a number of books about them or reading more about the civil rights movement at that time or
all of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. Wow.
All the above. I mean, the wonderful thing is these are four very, very prominent men. So there is no shortage of materials to read on all of them. No shortage of documents. The Freedom of Information Act even released a lot of the FBI files on several of these men. So, because, several of them were actually being tracked by the FBI throughout the 60s. So there's all those materials that help you connect a lot of the dots. So there's just a wealth of information, interviews. I mean, Jesus, I mean, in the case of Malcolm X, there's his own autobiography and then several subsequent biographies. Even Jim Brown has written several autobiographies. Wow. So there. So there's a lot, well, he wrote one autobiography when he was still young in the 60s, and there have been several subsequent biographies. So that, again, their lives are all so incredibly well documented. Of course, none more so than Muhammad Ali and Sam Cooke. I think there's been a lot of renewed interest in Sam Cooke in recent years because of the impact of a change is going to come. Peter Guralnick just wrote an incredible book, Dream Boogie, that was a great source of information, and it was wonderful. Guralnick actually came to the set and visited. So getting his stamp of approval on my characterization of Sam Cooke in a film, for me, was like, that was all that mattered to me, because people might not realize this, but Guralnick actually wrote the liner notes to Sam Cooke's Live at the Harlem Square album, which is probably one of the greatest live R&B soul albums of all time. Guralnick is the guy who wrote the liner notes. He's just one of the best music biographers alive. And to have him watch this film as it's being done and seeing the final version and saying the characterizations were spot on, to me, that was like, no one's going to tell me. That was the ultimate stamp of approval.
Was it a little tense the day he comes to set? Were you a little nervous?
I was a little nervous, actually. It was funny because at one point in the film, they only have vanilla ice cream, and that was a fact I got from Guralnick's book, and he forgot it. So really? He was like, the vanilla ice cream. I was like, I got that idea from you. You wrote about it in your book. He was like, did I? So it was really fun. I mean, as a
That's great.
writer, that kind of thing happens to me all the time, where other
I'm
people,
sure.
your fans and stuff like that, know your work sometimes better than you do.
I'm sure.
So it was really fun on having him on set.
So when you took it from stage to screen, what kind of changes did you end up making to the script to adapt it for film?
Pretty dramatic ones. I mean, I
Oh,
kind of
really?
started over. I really wanted to, I mean, it's not common for writers to adapt their own work. And I think that's probably a good thing, because a lot
Hmm.
of times we can be too precious about our own materials.
Hmm.
One of the wonderful things about having been a journalist is I'm not precious about my own stuff.
Hmm.
So if it doesn't serve the story, it has to go.
Hmm.
And the story for this film, this story in film had to be a bit different than the story I was trying to tell on stage. On stage, it begins, it's first, it's real time. It begins when they enter the room.
Oh, I
It's
see.
85 minutes real time, and the play ends when they leave the room.
Hmm.
The end. It's very theatrical in that way. And I knew that for the film it had to be very different. So I basically like reread my own play, but read it as a piece of source material, in the way that I would, if, as a screenwriter, as the way that I would look at any book or any magazine article that someone gave me. It's like, okay, this is a piece of source material. And there's a lot of elements of the play that are among the most popular parts of the play that aren't even in the film.
Wow.
Conversely, there are elements of the film that are definitely not in the play.
Hmm.
I mean, it's at the end of the day, the bulk of it is still going to be four guys in a room hashing it out behind closed doors.
Hmm.
But it's still very much a film, and as it exists in the film, is the story is very, very different than it was as a play.
What can the film do that the play can't, do you think?
It can show us what brought the guys to that moment. I mean,
Hmm.
the one of the wonderful things I loved having the opportunity to do was show each of the four men in the time leading up to that night,
Hmm.
which was something I couldn't do with the play. And because the play was so short, it's always been a one act.
Hmm.
You know, you kind of leave the play having to do a little bit of Googling
Hmm.
about, like, okay, where was this person? What were they doing right before? And I loved having the opportunity to kind of show why each of these men were feeling vulnerable in the time leading up to this.
Hmm.
So, and just being able to do things on a much more cinematic scope, basically
Hmm.
being able to get out of that room
Hmm.
at, you know, at times. Like, the reality is we don't even end up in the hotel room in the film till I think close to 40 minutes in.
Wow.
So I mean, that's, to me, that was like tremendous to actually
Hmm.
get to see some of the fights,
Hmm.
to see some of the other people in these guys' lives, what they were struggling with. To me, that was really exciting.
And can you talk a little bit about how Regina King got involved with it and came on as a director?
Yeah, I mean, well, she had, I believe, well, the producers, Keith and Jess Calder and Jody
Hmm.
Klein, they first, I wrote the script.
Hmm.
And then we got the script to a point where it was like, okay, they were ready to go out to directors.
Hmm.
And we all agreed that we wanted to go out to basically a new director,
Hmm.
someone who this would be one of their earlier films, just because I'd found in my experience with the play that it was great working with someone else like me, and
Hmm.
that they had the talent, they had the skill, but they, you know what I mean? Like, it
Hmm.
just felt like the stakes were the same with my first directors on the play. And
Hmm.
I would just love the opportunity to have, you know, have a director who had questions and just wanted to chat with me a little bit about the materials. So I had no idea who they were going to go out to.
Hmm.
And then one day they said, you know, Regina King, she was looking for her directorial feature. She's been directing in television,
Hmm.
obviously, for years. It's not like this is the first time she's ever been behind the camera, but she was looking at a theatrical feature, and she read the script and wanted to talk to me. I think at the time she was still filming Watchmen,
Hmm.
so we did a FaceTime call late one night after she finished filming. She was in Atlanta. I was
Hmm.
here in Los Angeles, and she just told me that she wanted to meet the person who wrote the script. She really loved it.
Hmm.
She read the play as well and noted all the differences, and just basically said she'd be thrilled to do
Hmm.
it. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'd be thrilled if you do it." So we hit it off right away, and I kind of expected that to be the end of it. Like, okay, well, I'll look forward to seeing it when it's done.
Hmm.
But quite the opposite. She was like, no, I'd really love to have you around, have you on set as much as you're available. She really kind of invited me to be a sounding board, which is how I ended up being, you know, an executive producer on the film as well, as opposed to in screenwriting. As a screenwriter, you're kind of accustomed to delivering the script and then kind of going on your way and hoping that you recognize something when it finally comes out in theater, or that your name is actually still on it. And instead, it was largely Regina who wanted me involved every step of the way, who asked me to be there for auditions, and really just wanted me to be a huge part of the process. So that really speaks to her, you know, confidence and her spirit of collaboration, which really caught me off guard, because that was not what I was accustomed to.
Yeah, how refreshing
at
and
this
nice
point.
to hear.
Yeah. And
Speaking of auditions, can you talk a bit about what it was like to see when the film was done, to see these four incredibly talented actors bring these legends to life?
oh, I mean, I was choked up, obviously, because look, as much as I'm a playwright at heart, and I love writing plays, but even when you have a play run, I mean, on Broadway, which I haven't, but this play ran at a number of different theaters. It even ran at the Dunbar in London, and it ran all over the world. It ran in South Africa. You realize that when people see it on television or in theater or in a movie theater, exponentially more people will see what your work than will have an opportunity to ever see it on a stage. So the reaction to the film has been kind of shocking, because it's a play that I wrote that was first produced in 2013, and it feels like a completely new thing to so many people. And so I was really kind of choked up, and their characterizations were just beyond what I could have expected. I just thought each of the core four actors just so overachieved in this film that, you know, I think a lot of people will come away, if you poll four people, each of the four might have a different favorite, because each of these guys just, you know, so drilled down on their characters so well and pulled so much out of them that I genuinely enjoyed watching the film, which a lot of times when you do work and you put it up there, it's kind of like cringe inducing to watch your own work, and at least, you know, the words that you've written. But I thought what Regina did, and again, that's, you know, Regina's the leader of this ship. She drove everything, you know, she drilled down, like, her execution of this, her vision really caught me off guard in a positive way.
In as much as there is a specific answer to this, who did you write this for? The play and the book, really? Or sorry, the play and the film.
I wrote it for myself at 19, because I wish I'd seen these icons of mine as human beings at that age. I wish I could see these kinds of stories. I mean, I wrote the play with the intention of it being for young adults. That was the intention of the play. Theater doesn't really work that way. It doesn't really have, you know, there's either children's theater or adult theater for subscribers who tend to be older. And I really wrote this as a play for the younger version of myself, to see these guys as relatable human beings struggling through the same things that all young people struggle through. Because we like to say that, like, you know, all these great movements are ultimately youth movements. And I was very cognizant of the fact that I was writing this play in my 30s, at late 30s. And I was already, by the time the play was produced, I was older than everyone in the play on the night that it happened. And think about that. Cassius Clay was 22 years old. Think about what you were doing at 22.
I wasn't
Jim Brown was
plays
28.
as good as that, or I wasn't winning the heavyweight champion of the world, or running for the Cleveland Browns or anything.
At Jim Brown retiring at 28. Yeah. I mean, really think about how young these guys were. And it should draw you closer to, it should show you what's possible for young people to do, as opposed to, like, the impossibility of these things. So that's really what and also I want people to watch this the same way they watch any good story about humanity. I mean, I am moved by stories that delve into the humanity of people, of individuals. I talk a lot about films that really move me, films like Capote with Philip Seymour Hoffman, just real people, but just getting into what makes them tick is something that interests me. And I, I just want to be able to tell stories featuring characters that look like me, Black
Mhm.
characters, and show that we are struggling through a lot of very legitimate emotional things. It shouldn't just be about what we're doing and being
Mhm.
superhuman. I didn't want to show these superhuman guys being superhuman. I wanted to show them being vulnerable and human, because that was as much a part of their lives. In fact, probably more of their lives than out there when they're out there running touchdowns, winning titles.
Mhm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that's a bigger part of who they were.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for writing this play and then film, and then for sharing it with us, and for taking the time to talk about it. I wish we could be doing it in person, but that's the way it is. But congratulations! I mean, what an amazing work you've put together here, and we're so thankful that you took the time out to do this, Kemp.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks again for inviting, having the film in the festival.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks so much, Kemp, and thanks everybody for checking out One Night in Miami.